Welcome to the Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Hi, everyone. As a woman, I believe that women should have complete autonomy when it comes to making decisions that involve their bodies. Some people don't. This includes having the right to decide if and when they're ready to become mothers. But here is the question that people have been debating for many years. When does life really begin? Weeks ago, we had a great conversation about this hotbed issue. And because we couldn't get to everything that needed to be said, we decided to have a part two about pro-life versus pro-choice. So let's get to it. Please welcome pro-life advocate Marie Strotter. Hi, Marie.
Hi, Tammi. Thank you for having me back.
Live Action News correspondent Christina Bennett is here. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Tammi. Thank you for having me on the show.
OBGYN Dr. Juanita Mestre Dudley is here with us again. Hi, Juanita.
Hi, thanks for having me back, Tammi.
And the host of the Mentally Divine podcast, Brian Pirapakran, is here as well. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Tammi, how you doing? I'm happy to be back.
Glad to be back to continue this discussion that we once had. Got so heated, we needed more time. So I brought more time. I brought y'all another whole hour, okay? So let's just get straight to business and let's just hit it on the one. Abortion. Should it be legalized or not, Marie?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about that. I personally believe that life begins at conception. I am against abortion. And so therefore, it's not a choice as far as I'm concerned, because it is another life. But Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. So by that token, it is legal, even though I don't personally think that that is a good choice.
Would you like to see it reversed?
I think it's a lot more complicated. I think it's a lot more complicated than people who are against it saying I'm against it. I wish it had never been law, but now that it is law, we do have a process under the Constitution for making things, we have to amend things. So I think that there is a process that we would need to go through. And that goes for any law. So I think there are laws that I like. And if it were so easy to change it when there's a law that I don't like, the reverse can happen. So I think we have to go by what is established in order to change things.
Dr. Mestre Dudley.
Well, everyone knows that I am pro-choice because I do believe it's a woman's right to choose what to do with her body, regardless of what anyone else thinks. I still believe pro-choice does not mean that we are against life. We're just for women choosing what to do with their body and when to do it. And we also say that if you choose not to have an abortion, that is also your right. But everyone has the right to decide what to do with their body and to make these decisions, what's right for their family and themselves with their doctor.
Brian.
Absolutely. We should have abortions be legalized in this country. And I'm so glad that Roe v. Wade is still standing. It's so unfortunate that we have a lot of, pro-life conservative identifying people who want to overturn Roe v. Wade and strip the agency of women and childbearing persons all across the United States. I think the main point is this. When we talk about pro-life, pro-choice, we're talking about someone having the right to choose what's right and best for them versus people who want to take that liberty and that freedom from them. It's unjust, and I absolutely think that it should be legal. And I'm also saying this, I'm going to revert back to what I said in the first episode. I'm pro-choice universally. I am pro-women and childbearing people to choose whether or not they want to keep that baby. If they want to keep that baby, by all means, please do it. I love you for it. You like it, I love it. When it comes down to people who don't want to have that baby, they don't want to have it. They may not be emotionally, mentally, or financially prepared. Let's leave that decision to them.
Christina.
I believe that unborn children deserve legal protection. I'm only alive today and even able to have this discussion with you lovely folks because my mom walked out of an abortion appointment. But it was an African-American woman, a janitor who was mopping the hospital floor, who saw her crying and told her, God will give you the strength to have your baby. And she walked out of the abortion doctor's office later on that morning after he yelled at her and told her to stay. But it shouldn't have taken all of that. I should have had a legal right to live, to be born. I should have been protected. I was born in 1981. if I was born in 1971, just 10 years prior, I wouldn't have had to even go through that situation. My mom wouldn't have had to go through that situation. So I do not believe that it should be legal to terminate, to dismember, to end the lives of innocent human beings in the womb. That is an act that should not be legal.
What is reproductive justice and why is it important, Dr. Mestry Dudley?
Well, reproductive justice is that women should be protected in whatever choice that they make. So if she decides that she wants to have an abortion, that's really no one else's business but her and her doctor. It's her right to make that decision. Everyone has a reason for why they have an abortion. I'm so happy that your mom decided to have you, but that was her choice in that moment. Okay. And other women have to have that choice to make as well. There are many women who feel like they're pressured to have that child as opposed to, having the option to have an abortion. So I do believe that women deserve that right to choose. And everyone has a different situation. Who knows what's going on in their house? And what people don't understand is that the mental health issue that goes along with it, sometimes it's not physical, it's mental. The mental issue that she has to go with, struggling with, should I keep this baby, should I not? That should be something she discussed with her doctor and her family, and whatever choice she decides should be hers. And that's why it should be legal as well.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me that when we talk about abortion, a lot of people think that there's this woman who's out partying and having sex with everybody, and then she goes and she has an abortion, and it's like, going to get a pap smear, and then she comes back, and then she parties again, then she has another pregnancy, then she goes and gets an abortion, and she comes back, when it's never really, that's never really the picture, right, Brian?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a complete misconception. It's a complete misrepresentation of what exactly abortions are. And again, we're talking about people making the decision for themselves, whether or not they want to keep a baby because of the fact of their own mental, emotional, and financial preparedness. If you're not mentally, emotionally, and financially prepared to bring a life into this world and give it the proper tender love and care, then why are we going to be irresponsible adults and try to do that, or try to force other people based on our own personal beliefs? Religious beliefs, political beliefs? It makes absolutely no sense. So again, it is a misrepresentation. To your question, Tammy, the question about reproductive justice, I'll tell you exactly what reproductive justice is. It's when women have the absolute autonomy to make the decision for themselves, but also having the proper tools and information to do it. I think last time we talked about informational packets that were given and informed consent laws. 23 out of 29 states in the United States were actually looked into by the Informed Consent Project, and actually really looked at these laws. A lot of these states have created informational packets to give women that are state created, meaning politicians created it, lawmakers created it, without the input of researchers, right? That's absolutely not reproductively just. When we're talking about giving women the absolutely necessary truth for them to make a decision, it's not reproductive justice. When you're trying to dissuade people from making a decision because of your personal beliefs. So, I mean, that's what I think about reproductive justice.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, doctor.
Now, just to piggyback on that, they make it very difficult for women to even make that choice. And it's a very stressful choice now due to the fact that so many women are starting their careers. And it's a very male-driven world where even in my field as an OBGYN, where I'm in the business of delivering babies and making babies, and we should be happy, we're so stressed about how it impacts our position at the hospital or in our practice, especially in private practice, where, you might want to be partner, but now you're pregnant and you're out, and then you're taking time away from the other people in the practice. It becomes very stressful, and it's a decision like, should I do this now or should I do it later? Am I going to make partnership now or should I hold off? And this is how it is in even the business world and everything for women now who are trying to start their careers. And this is the mental issue that's going on with us.
Right. Marie?
Well, when you talk about reproductive justice, it sounds like one of those euphemisms that we talked about before, because in a just world, everyone would have a say. It is the woman. However, the man has also created a child, and the life that is within the mother is a separate body. If you leave that egg alone, You can't make something from nothing. There is an egg, there is sperm, they come together, they make, the embryo, the zygote, whatever. It is a baby. It is a life. If you leave it alone as a living egg, living sperm, what does it make? Something that is living. And so that living entity, as Christina pointed out, should have legal protection also. And so if you're talking about justice, where is the justice? Our Constitution says we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Christina?
Well, honestly, it's not a word that I use just because it's used so interchangeably with abortion. So many times when I hear the word reproductive justice, I know it doesn't only stand for abortion, but so often it's used as a code word instead of abortion. So it's not a word that I use. But I wanted to comment on what you said, Tammi, about the way that we view women. When my mother was planning to abort me, when she paid the money to abort me, my mother is an incredible woman. My mother has survived domestic abuse. My mother was a single mom. I mean, my mom is my hero. And it's possible, I know it's possible for me, so I hope it's possible for other people, to look at women, Black women, and to see their strength and to see their value and to have compassion and understand they're scared, or perhaps they're being pressured, or perhaps they just feel like they have to make this decision because of their job or career. It's possible to have empathy for them while still saying the act of dismembering a child in the womb is an act of violence, and that is an act that is morally wrong. And it is also, I believe, physically, emotionally, spiritually harmful to a woman, as well as taking the life of a child, which do we have the right to do that as a society? And so it's possible to still have empathy for women and not think, oh, they're a bunch of promiscuous people. There's a million reasons why women choose to have abortion. I've worked with women. I worked for 4 years at a pregnancy center. I've worked with women who've chosen to leave and go have abortions, who've chosen to parent, who've chosen to have adoption. And I honestly don't look at them any different, whatever their choice is, but I still am firm in my belief that that choice is a harmful, destructive choice that ends a human life.
Let's make the choice to go to a commercial right now. We'll come right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and my guest today, or I should say the Business of Being Black today, is pro-life versus pro-choice. So let's get down to it. Please welcome pro-life advocate Marie Strotter, live action news correspondent Christina Bennett, OBGYN Dr. Juanita Mestri Dudley, and the host of the Mentally Divine podcast, Brian Pira Packrin. Thank you all for being here. Marie brought up a very good point, and I want to talk to Brian about it real quick. Marie said, what about the man? It takes an egg and a sperm in order to create a baby. And so why wouldn't that man have a choice as well? The baby belongs to him too.
Yeah, but ultimately the person's body who is shifting and transforming and evolving is the woman's body or the childbearing person. So I think for me, that's an easy decision. And I'm talking to you as a man, right? As a male. So I'm telling you from my perspective and also from what makes sense and scientifically is backed and supported. Yeah, it's the person whose body is evolving and changing who has the final decision. I think again, it's important that the person is having conversations, right? They can have conversations with their spouse, their partner, they're having conversations with their physician, family members, but ultimately the decision is for the person whose body is changing. So I think that, unfortunately, again, in this male-dominated patriarchal society, we're continuously trying to say, well, what about the man? Well, what about the man? And unfortunately, no, it's not your decision to make.
Tammi, if I could jump in. Brian said that the body who is changing and evolving should have a say. And if we know anything about childbirth or developmental stages, we know that the body of the child is developing and changing and evolving in the womb. So.
And now I jump in.
Yeah.
But the body that's changing and evolving in the womb can't do so without the body that it's in, and it's only viable after a certain point in time. It cannot survive by itself. That's the problem. And that's why the laws have it that when it can survive by itself, that's when we have that cutoff point. It's not indefinite. Abortion is not indefinite. It's to a point until the child is viable. Till then, that woman should have that choice to say, you know what, this is not right for my body. This is not right for my mental stability. This is not right for my family structure. And if you want to bring the man into it, how many times am I watching a poor woman who's giving birth by herself, who had a partner who said, we're in this together, and she is then by herself with her mom or her dad in the room. And it's very stressful. Sometimes I'm the only person with the nurse that's holding her hand while she's delivering. So it's all well and good that the guy should be in the conversation, but at the end, he can get up and leave at any point in time, and she cannot. So it's up to ultimately her decision.
Christina, Tennessee lawmakers introduced legislation that would allow a father to deny an abortion without the pregnant woman's consent. What are your thoughts on this proposed bill?
So you're saying that the father would be able to say no to an abortion without the mother?
Yes.
Well, that's the first I've heard about that. Honestly, I think that if we're going to have a discussion about men with abortion, one of the things that just comes to my mind is that really men benefit from abortion primarily. I think that men benefit from abortion oftentimes more than women. And my own experience, my mother was pressured by my father to have an abortion. And in the majority of situations when I've worked with women, I wish I could say that I've seen the men begging their partners to keep the baby and saying, I will adopt the baby and I will do whatever it takes to stand by you. But most of the time, it's the men pressuring the woman to have an abortion. Most of the time, it's him saying, I'm going to give you the money to do it. Or sometimes there may be multiple women that he's had, relationships with, or multiple children that he has. And so I would love to see men more involved in this conversation, and perhaps there could be some legislation that comes from that. But I don't think it will happen until men start to acknowledge how much they benefit from abortion, how much they benefit from pressuring women or coercing women to abort. And I don't only mean men in a individual relationship. I also mean even just men in society and corporations, where a woman's boss can say to her, I would prefer that you have an abortion than for me as my company to pay for, you to take time off after you've had a baby. And so it's not, or professors in school who help women to, they make it clear to women that it would be easier for them to have an abortion than it would be for them to finish their course load. So we are in a society where women are vulnerable and we are oftentimes oppressed. And I think that abortion plays into it. So before we even start looking at legislation for men, for them to have perhaps rights in this conversation, there has to be an acknowledgement of how much they benefit from abortion.
I love that you said that, Christina. It's so often the truth. But here's my question to either one of you. There are men making the laws.
Yes.
More men than women making the laws. So why doesn't the law, I would say, or people who are against abortion, which are men who are making the law, why are they against abortion if men favor more when it comes to having abortions?
Let me tell you. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it just depends on the man. It depends on the state. It depends on the law. I'm from Connecticut, so that's not happening in my state. We have a very pro-choice state. We don't even require parental notification laws, which means that minors are not required to tell their parents if they want to have an abortion, but they are required by law to tell their parents if they want to go tanning, if they want their ears pierced, or if they want a tattoo. In addition to that, we don't have any sort of waiting periods, and we allow abortions past 24 weeks. And so in my state, I can't think of, I couldn't even give you a handful of men that are vocally pro-life as legislators and are vocally championing pro-life legislation. And those who have tried, it hasn't gotten that far. But if you look at a southern state, there are a lot of, pro-life men, anti-abortion men, whatever they call themselves, that may be because of their faith, that's a portion of it, that may be because of their moral beliefs that an unborn child is a human being. And of course, people can always assume negative opinions as well. Some people would say, oh, that's because they want to control women or whatever the case may be, or they're racist. We can all come to our own assumptions. But when I've traveled to the South and I've met with pro-life legislators in those states, I usually find that it's a combination of faith, moral beliefs, and just what they believe is right or wrong.
Well,
Dr.
Christina, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Dudley.
Sorry.
Let's read that.
So, what I was going to say is it's funny because most of these politicians who are pro-life, they're pro-life until it happens to their family. And then all of a sudden their daughter sneaks off and gets an abortion, or their mistress on the side sneaks off and gets an abortion. And we see that all the time in the news. So it's more about control. It's a lot about control. It's like how now you said in Minnesota, they want to have the man dictate whether or not she can get an abortion. It used to be like that with tubal ligations. Like you have to get your husband's permission to, not have any more children. So it is strictly about control when it comes to them. So that's all I have to say on that subject. Go ahead,
Brian.
Listen, so I don't know if anybody has ever read the book, The Birth Dearth. Jane Elliott does a great job at explaining it. When we talk about men are the ones who are mainly making the decisions in this country, particularly the laws and the legislation, we have to really add a social location there that people don't really like to always say, but it's white men. And the reason why, and again, the book just details it so greatly, the reason why that is because of this quote unquote idea of race suicide, that white people are afraid that black people and populations that are of color are going to overpopulate and saturate the country more than them, and then make them the minority. So there is a complete awareness of this, particularly when they are the majority, right? And this is not a conspiracy theory. I implore everybody to go and do the research. I also want to say this is not the first time when we talk about these types of legislations like the one in Tennessee, this isn't the first time where let's bring men into the conversation, or other people. The last show, I encourage everybody to go FOXSOUL.tv, go to The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack, and watch the first episode. Doe v. Bolton was the Supreme Court case that was brought up. And I'm so disheartened and disappointed that the former person who actually brought this up to buttress and support the pro-life side. Sandra Bensing from March 25th. Oh, we may not have time, but.
Well, hold that thought. We'll be right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Today, the business of being Black is pro-life versus pro-choice. Let's talk about this from the African-American perspective, because that's what the business of being Black is all about. What factors contribute to African-American women having the highest rate of unintended pregnancies, do you think, Marie?
Well, I can tell you why I think they have the highest rate of abortion, and that's because abortion clinics are in predominantly communities of color, and that is by design. Planned Parenthood was started by a eugenicist who had colleagues that were involved with Nazi Germany. And so when you see that it was started out as the Negro Project because we were undesirables and human weeds, and that is continuing till today. Brian just made that point, that there are people that do not want to see us become more than 13% of the population. And so I believe that that is by design, that they are in communities of color. Because we are those undesirables and human weeds that Margaret Sanger designed her extermination project for.
Brian?
Yeah, no, so I debunked this in the last episode, but again, Margaret Sanger definitely did have some problems, and we definitely should discuss those. But considering the lack of healthcare options that are available in Black and brown communities, and the percentage, the small percent of abortions that actually even come out from Planned Parenthood, 3% and 4%, is absolutely not substantiated to say that they're trying to eradicate the Black population. It's not true, not statistically significant, not in 2021. And so I also wanted to go back to make the point that I was making earlier, which was I was disheartened and disappointed that the Doe v. Bolton case was actually even brought up to support a pro-life stance, considering the actual facts of the case. In 1968, there was a Georgia law that permitted abortions only if medical or mental defects of rape medical or mental defects were found in the child or the fetus, and or the pregnancy was out of a product of a rape. But then it also stipulated that physicians needed to consult two other physicians, A Georgia State Board of Health and accredited medical organization needed to approve of it. The Joint Commission on Accreditation of Hospitals needed to approve of it. The physician had to receive approval for the women's case from a committee within that hospital, additional from the outside committee. And then even then, when those conditions were met, the abortion law included additional provisions restricting abortions. The law required women who claimed to have been raped to produce documentation of the rape as proof, which is so demonstrably bad, considering we know the statistics of underreporting, misreporting, and not reporting at all because people are ashamed that they've been raped and or they feel like they're not going to be believed. And it also made sure that these abortion decisions had to be backed up by courts. So there was legal bureaucracy that was put in there. All of that was restricting people's decisions to make choices. And what I tend to grapple with all the time, which I feel that pro-life people need to contend with and reconcile inwardly, is the fact that you mentioned, Marie, you mentioned how in the Declaration of Independence, which is not even barred by any law, Declaration of Independence does say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator certain unalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But again, what about the women in this waking world, the Black women in this waking world, who are at higher, disproportionately higher rates of mortality because they're pregnant? One. Two, what about them making the decision just because they make the decision, just because they want to make that decision for themselves? I always say this: we have to grapple with the fact that you are no different than the oppressor who wants to restrict and take away the agency of people to make that decision for themselves as much as from your own personal beliefs.
Marie,
You're no different
I
than the
see you
oppressor.
shaking your head, Marie.
Well, again, as we talked about last time, I debunked where it was 3% of their services for Planned Parenthood. They themselves in their annual report in 2016, 2017 said that it was up to 14% of their services. And I also said that they are bundled when it's not per person, because per person, it would sound a lot higher than it really is. But if I go in and I have a pap smear and I am tested for STDs and I have some other things, those each are counted as a service. So if there are 3 million services that are bundled together, that's where they get that low 3%. But even in, as I said, in their own annual report, it says that it is 14% and only 1.2% are referred out for adoption. Now, I'm an adoptive mom, so I believe strongly in, I'm not just talking the talk, I'm also walking the walk, and I'm not patting myself on the shoulder, but I did adopt 2 older children who had some challenges. So I do understand that. And I understand coming alongside of a woman. As I mentioned last time, there are organizations that will do that. Pro-Love Ministries, Let Them Live. There are a number of pregnancy centers who will walk alongside of a woman who chooses to keep her child, help them with rent, help them with childcare, help them with diapers, help them with all the resources they need. So it is a viable option. There are people who will adopt an embryo. There are people who, if you were to, as we were talking about at a clinic, we were saying that after a child survives a botched abortion, Barack Obama signed into law that they don't have the right to have medical care, and they're in a clinic. So why can't they be surrendered like the safe haven laws?
Marie,
Are people who will adopt them.
Definitely get in on this because I see you looking real
It
salty.
was multiple things. Like Marie says that Black women are having a higher rate of abortion. Actually, it was white women who first had a higher rate, and now we're kind of equaling out, and we're slightly higher, but the difference is so insignificant between 2010 to 2019 that it's very insignificant. It's actually around the same rate. So no, it's not that they're trying to kill off Black people more. The abortion clinics were placed in Black neighborhoods to give Black women actually more access, because that was also a problem. We weren't having access. And if you don't have access, you then do things around the corner, meaning like back street alley abortions, because you can't find a place to get it done or you don't have the funds to do it. So that's why it is actually better to open up some of these abortion clinics in our areas so that we, Black women, can have an option. Sometimes it's a teenager who does not want to have a baby. And the thing is that why in Connecticut, why you say that children, when kids are pregnant, they don't need a parental consent is because when you are pregnant, you become emancipated at that time. Only for that. For pregnancy, you don't need a parent's permission to do anything. You can go to the doctor yourself, but to get like birth control, you need like, not birth control, but like for other services, you do need your parental consent. So that's why it makes you an emancipated person at that time, because you are pregnant. So that's why you don't need a parental consent. But the point was that these were placed there so that we can have access, which is why the mortality rate in Black women is so high in the first place, is because we don't have access to half of the care that is necessary, either financial means, or we don't have access to the proper physicians and so forth. So that is actually why, and that's why I was kind of shaking my head. Like, I don't think they're there to try to kill off Black people. I think Black women make that decision on their own because they are not ready to carry a child, or whatever the reason that they want. They just don't want the baby. And that's kind of why I was shaking my head at that moment. Sorry, Marie, you can go ahead.
Christina?
Yes, so there is a very dark and well-documented history of Planned Parenthood. In fact, the Manhattan Planned Parenthood in New York, there's a reason why they just removed Margaret Sanger's name from their New York building. They removed Margaret Sanger's name because they know that she was a eugenicist, that she believed in population control, and she had something called the Negro Project. This is not a myth. This is well documented, in which she hired Black ministers to promote birth control. Now, the question is, did she do it because of wanting to help women of color, or did she have more sinister motives? I believe that because of her board members, one of her board members was a man named Lothrop Stoddard, who wrote a book called The Rising Tide of Color Against White Supremacy. So she filled her early board of the American Birth Control League before it became Planned Parenthood with white supremacists and racists. So I have a problem thinking that they were just out to help Black women. And Protecting Black Life has done some census study to determine that 78% of abortion clinics are located in lower income minority neighborhoods. I believe part of the reason is because of profit. When my mom was trying to leave the abortion doctor's office, the first thing he said to her was, "You've already paid for this." He made that very clear. You've already paid for this. And not every doctor, OBGYN has that motive, but I believe that there is a motive for some people of profit. Now, why do Black women choose to have abortion? For a number of different reasons. I think part of the reason, like I mentioned before, is coercion. I've met many women who have been coerced by partners, by parents, by family.
Hold that thought, Christina. We're going to take a quick break and come right back on Business of Being Black. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Please welcome pro-life advocate Marie Strotter to the show today, Live Action News correspondent Christina Bennett, OBGYN Dr. Juanita Mestry Dudley, and the host of the Mentally Divine podcast, Brian Pirapakran. Before we left, Christina, you were talking about Planned Parenthood and its intentions.
Yes, I was. And I was just sharing how their organization was founded with eugenics philosophy, population control, forced sterilization, and a whole bunch of other things that are pretty dark. And that was the founding of their organization, which their roots play into the organization today. But I was answering the question as to why Black women choose abortion. And there are obviously a number of reasons. Every woman makes an abortion decision for her own particular reason. But some of the reasons I've seen with working for women over 17 years of doing pro-life work, sometimes it's coercion from a partner, from a parent, from a family member. Oftentimes I see a lot of hopelessness, and the majority of times I see a lack of support. They can't find adequate housing. They already have other children they can't care for. They need help with daycare. They don't have financial resources, and they oftentimes feel alone. That's why I was happy to work for a nonprofit pregnancy resource center that offered free resources for women. And one of the things that I would ask a client is, if you had fill in the blank, would you choose to parent, choose abortion or choose adoption? What is driving your decision? And oftentimes I found that it was a financial issue that was driving their decision. I think it's important to note, because we're talking about Black women, that in my experience, white women that I've seen in the pro-choice movement, they romanticize abortion in a different way that Black women do not. And what I mean by that is, when I've traveled across the country, I've seen white women talk about abortion in a way, of course, they use words like reproductive justice, but also freedom, liberation, self-care. I've seen abortion on T-shirts, on hats, on dresses, on tattoos. And when you talk to women who are actually considering abortion, very rarely do you see a Black woman who is using that kind of language. She's very rarely saying, I want to exercise my reproductive justice and liberation. Oftentimes she's like, I need to pay my bills and I can't have this baby. So in my experience, I've seen that Black women see abortion more as a necessary evil or a choice that they have, more than something that is romanticized, which I've seen more in the white community when they talk about abortion as a privilege and something that can liberate. Oftentimes, I think Black women just feel like they have no other choice.
Wow. Dr. Mestry Dudley, what are some of the reasons that Black women have abortions?
I agree with her. Like a lot of times it's because you do feel like you have no other option. You're financially strapped. Your family is not ideal at that moment, but it still brings it back to it's her choice. She has an option. She does have other options in most all our, well, OBGYNs I know. We discuss all these things. We go through all your options that you have. You know, you can carry to term and adopt. And we have quite a few of our teenagers that we have done that, that you do have that choice, that if you do not feel like you want to carry this baby, that is also your option. We give them options. We don't just say, hey, you know what, there's an abortion. But the reasons why are vast. Some women do it because they just don't want to have a baby. But Black women, it's not all Black women that do it because they're financially strapped. They sometimes just don't want to be a parent. They're in their careers right now and they don't feel like having a child, and they want to set aside when they want to have their baby, just the way that they do their career. I don't want a baby right now, but I want one in the future. And this is an option. And this is an ability that I have. And I think everyone deserves that right to make that choice. Just like you have the choice to carry a child, you should have the choice to say, this is not right for me right now.
I may be reaching a little bit here, but I'm going to reach. I'm going to go for it. All right.
John.
What if the law said if you had a baby by someone, you have to marry that person because the child has to have the right to have a mother and a father who are co-joined?
There will be way more abortions.
Well, and so that's part of the statistics as well.
If we're talking about the baby, right? We're talking about the baby. And the baby has rights, and the baby, somebody has to fight for the child. So,
but in the same respect, the people who talk about the baby has rights don't set up anything to take care of the baby after the baby is born. They're like, you can't have an abortion, but guess what? Now that you have it, we're not giving any money to take care of this baby. We're not setting you up with, like, look what's in, we're trying to just get Family Leave Act so that a mother can stay home or the father can stay home and take care of them and not have to worry about paying bills at that time because, you know, they're getting some money. And we can't even pass that. Okay. So all these people talking about, we're so pro-life, but at the same time, you're not giving the life any ability. You're not setting them up in school properly. You're not giving them any, they want to take away welfare, even though half of it's not even, Black people are not the ones that are truly on welfare as much as you think that they are.
But there is a lot of legislation that honestly, that is for single mothers. And I mean, there's a ton of legislation. Even during this whole pandemic, we saw families get majority of the stimulus checks.
Yes, and they're trying to take that away right now too, because they feel like what they, as Manchin says, we're going to go use it to go buy drugs and use the free time to go hunting. So there you go. That's what they make with the money. But it's also who can get it. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of loopholes to get through some of these, to get some of these programs. And a lot of these programs are not available to some of our women.
Marie, what do you say about
that? Well, first of all, we go back to the Great Society of Lyndon Baines Johnson, right? Where he incentivized men to leave the home. And that's when the whole welfare thing started. But to get back to the point about how many men are legislating abortion, we live in a representative democracy, meaning if you don't like the way that someone votes, you vote them out. We all vote and we can vote. I think on the last show we were talking about, oh, well, there's such a cost to go out of state, and you have to rent a hotel and you have to do these things. We're independent Black people. Who doesn't have an ID? Who doesn't have some of these things? Who doesn't have resources to be? Don't make us sound like we are helpless. There are some of us who are indigent, just like there are of other colors and other races. But, the arguments that we make us sound so helpless, like we can't do things for ourselves. And that's wrong to victimize us in that way. There are people who are indigent, and I believe that they should have the health care that they need. They should have the childcare that they need. I worked in childcare for many, many years on policy side, as well as actually working on the floor. I believe not only do we need childcare, paid quality childcare, but for shift workers too, not just 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I believe all of those things. And I think if we tighten up some of the excesses that we have, I think Rand Paul does a thing around this time of year for Festivus, all the waste. I think it was $35 trillion in waste. Watching pigs watch cartoons or something like that. Crazy money for stupid things. If we rein in some of that money so that people can have paid leave. My husband was blessed to be able to have 3 months of paid parental leave after our oldest child was born. He also had leave after we adopted our children, and he did get the same kind of he got some leave. He was with a different company when we adopted our 2 children. So I do believe that there are some supports that we need to put into place for indigent families. But don't make us sound like we're all in that same boat.
Christina.
The United States is one of the most radical countries in the world when it comes to abortion. We're one of only 7 countries in the entire globe that does abortions after 7 weeks. Not every single state, but there are at least 5 or so states that would allow it after 20 weeks. But at the same time, we are one of the worst countries in the world when it comes to maternal mortality. And so something has to change. I agree with the panelists that we need better services and resources for women. I would like my taxpayer dollars to go towards helping women, to helping families. I am a foster parent myself. I'm an adoptive parent. I adopted my son through foster care at the beginning of the pandemic. And every single phone call I received in the process of waiting to adopt him was just, a horrifying phone call. And the social workers that I was working with were just literally wanting to pull their hair out because there are not enough homes. And then especially with COVID, people are afraid to take in children because they don't want their child to get COVID and then bring COVID home. And so we need resources. But I will say this, the fact that we allow abortion, and especially after 20 weeks, in a way that prevents organizations and politicians and people from doing what they really need to do for women, because abortion is offered as an easier option. So if a company has to decide between paying women, to stay home with their child, or paying for a policy that would allow for them to have the abortion pill, we have to be real about it and recognize that it's going to be so much cheaper for them to pay for their employees to have the abortion pill than it is to pay for their employees to have, paid leave. And so I think part of the reason why we have so many issues is because we think abortion is cheaper and easier, and we don't want to provide for women's real needs.
Let's take a quick break. Come right back on Business of Being Black. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Today, the business of being Black is pro-life versus pro-choice, part 2. But welcome, Christina Bennett, to the show. I appreciate you. What I appreciate about you the most is that you're not so one-sided as to not believe that things are happening that the other side says are really true. I appreciate, how you approach the business of pro-life versus pro-choice, where there's truth to speak on it. And I very much appreciate that. But what can you tell us about the 2,363 campaign?
Well, that campaign is through live action, and we're just highlighting the fact that statistically 2,363 unborn children die every day because of abortion. And we have a video on our website, 2363.org, which is from a former abortion doctor, Dr. Levitano. He has a really fascinating story of how he ended up doing abortions for years, but he got out of it when his adoptive daughter was killed in an accident, and it just caused him to see things differently. And even before that, when his wife was infertile, and he was realizing every day, I am ending human lives when my wife and I are trying to have a baby. And he realized he was part of the problem. And so he ended up stopping doing abortions. And now he details what happens in an abortion, which is something that we haven't actually talked about in this conversation thus far, at least in this episode. We talk about abortion, and a lot of times people don't even know what that really looks like. And so there are videos that show you what happens during an abortion and what happens to the unborn child in that procedure and the violence that takes place to end a human life. And when we show those videos to people on the street, it opens their eyes. I grew up in a family of all Democrats. I grew up in a family where pro-choice Connecticut, I never heard abortion talked about at church, never heard a sermon on abortion. I never had a conversation in my home about abortion. So me being a pro-life advocate was just, I never had that in my cards. But when my mom told me that she was pressured to abort and she ran out and the doctor yelled at her, I began to look into it more. And when I learned about the procedures and how gruesome they are, and even the fact that some children do survive, they're not just numbers. My friend Melissa Oden, my friend Claire Colwell, they survived abortions. They have medical records that say survivor of a failed saline abortion. My friend Claire, she lost her twin brother because the doctor didn't realize that there were twins. And so he was aborted and she survived, but she came out and had to go into a cast as a young child. These stories are not popular. You're not going to hear them on the news, but these stories are real. And there's many other stories like that. So if you go to the website 2363.org, it shows the abortion procedures and it has information for people to think about abortion and what their views are.
Dr. Mestry Dudley, how can we find you?
Oh, I'm at North Shore University Hospital. I'm currently a hospitalist, a safety officer there, as well as an assistant professor at the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra and North Shore. So I don't perform abortions myself, but I do believe that women do have that right and that choice. And not every abortion is brutal. If you get it before 12 weeks, it's literally a suction. It's not pulling apart limbs and so forth. So I hope that your video also shows them that it's not brutal. Some of it's very simple, but that it's a choice that you have and that you shouldn't be made to feel bad if you decide to do that. So that's my stance on it.
Marie, talk about the mission behind African-American conservatives.
Well, African-American conservatives is the bridge between the Black community and the conservative community. By nature, we tend to be pretty conservative. We tend to be pretty religious. We tend to believe in marriage and life and those sorts of things. So talking about conservative values, entrepreneurship, Black generational wealth, those sorts of topics, we tend to talk through our blog and on Facebook and Twitter. We're at AACONS, and you can find us there.
Brian, Mentally Divine, the podcast.
Yes, the Mentally Divine podcast, again, is one of those podcasts. We cover all big substantive topics to move the needle for Black, Afro-Latinx, Latinx, LGBTQIA populations to show that we have something positive, something substantive to say in very informed conversations and dialogues. It's not just the tropes and stereotypes that we are portrayed on social media, on reality television, and we host the show on Sundays and Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at Mentally Divine on Twitter. And I would just end by saying this. I think that, the pro-choice, I'm pro-choice, universally pro-choice, will always stand by that. I want to give a shout out to Christina Bennett and Marie Strader for being like adoptive parents and for wanting to do that and for encouraging people in the community to do that as well. I still contend with that and grapple with that, considering, the pro-life stance is very, very much a religious and political elixir, right? It's just a combination of those and those kind of viewpoints. So I don't know. I still grapple with that, but I firmly appreciate the fact that we're having this dialogue. I think it's really great to show that we're not a monolithic group. Tammi Mack obviously bringing us all together. Shout out to you. But we need to have these conversations. It's so important. And we also have conversations similar to this on the Mentally Divine podcast.
In 3 words, only 3 words. Christine is like, 3 words. What would you tell a woman who walked into wherever you are, if you're in the line at the grocery store and said, I want to have an abortion? What would you say to her in 3 words, Marie?
You had to pick me first, right? You're not alone.
Brian?
It's your choice.
Christina?
I have 3 words. I want to say, I couldn't say it in 3 words, but I want to say hope, help, and here. Like, I want to say there's hope, there's help available for you if you need it, and I'm here for you. It's not.
Yeah, I get it. We get it. Yeah. There is hope. You are here and available. And Dr. Mestry Dudley, your 3 words.
It's your body.
It's your body. It's your choice. There's hope. You're not alone. Those are all wonderful, optimistic views to share with a woman who has to come across and make that decision or not. Because I'm sure there are more women than not that have to face that choice. So I appreciate all of you, your words. Thank you so much, Marie. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dr. Mestry Dudley. And thank you, Christina Bennett, for being on the show. I appreciate you so very much. Now get ready for some hardcore gossip. That's what's next. It's Cocktails with the Queens. That you got Vivica, you got Claudia, you got Selena, and of course, you got Lisa Ray. Coming up next, I'm Tammi Mack, and that's the business of being Black.